everybody, I'm Trellis Usher, and you're watching PAX 8 Live.
Hi, I'm Ryan Walsh, and I'm here to talk to you about One Good Thing. The One Good Thing campaign provides an opportunity for everyone to welcome and embrace empathy, kindness, and compassion during this season of giving and celebration.
Mercy.
Our efforts can result in significant positive changes, and we need more of that. We all need more of that. Let's unite our individual strengths to create a collective force for impact.
The bad guys are becoming more sophisticated.
Please stay tuned for more information.
I think everybody knows, hey, I might get hacked.
Government officials insist that this is an isolated incident.
There's a lot of risk out there.
This is not a test.
Be prepared.
Stay tuned for further instructions.
It's never too late to start down this journey of cybersecurity.
It's a hard topic and it needs to be addressed.
We will continue to keep you informed as this story unfolds.
What's up, everyone? Happy Friday, and welcome to the game on PAX 8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of from the last week. We've got quite a bit to cover today, but we're also going to go off on a bit of a tangent and talk about professional services and how you should be applying professional services, your MSP, to the security space and beyond. Before we get started, let's cover housekeeping. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that jazz. Don't forget to sign up for PAX 8 Beyond. We've got just about 2 months left of that early bird price. And that price is going to go up quite a bit, and it's not going to come back down. So make sure you get your ticket now if you're going to come. And with that, let's jump into the news.
Man, Dom, I'm just dying over Chibi Ryan Walsh, right? Like, I think that was fantastic.
Cool.
It was so good. It's so good. Anyways, no, fantastic to whoever did that.
Before we get into the news,
yeah, man,
I think there's two things. One, do you promise, like pinky promise, that you're super secure? Because I do.
Okay, I pinky promise, I suppose. Yeah.
So now we're qualified to do work for DHS, according
that's
to
it.
the new standard that just came out. That's it. Yeah.
Oh,
it's self-assessment. So you just
self-assessed.
Yeah.
Oh man, I had to do a lot of introspection there. Did you see how long I had to think about that? Whether I was super secure before I pinky promised? I would think that was
so secure.
At least $1 million in lost revenue. I can't even imagine having to do more than that, where I'd have to actually assess and be looked at by somebody and scale some operations. I can't imagine. Anyways, I digress. Yeah, fair. So, yeah, let's pop on to the news, and we'll see where we're at here. We're having a little bit of a feed issue, but we'll see if we're good. All right, the first one was one you brought up, Dom, right? The Clark County School District in Nevada was dealing with a quote-unquote potentially massive data breach as hackers and meal parents. First off, let's just say potentially massive data breach. Is that just saying its size is different? Because breach or not breach is the statement, right? Like it's either an incident still or it's a breach. But since they're emailing children's parents,
I believe it's a breach.
Probably it's a breach.
Probably
a
breach.
Yeah. CCSD is the 5th largest school district in the U.S. with over 300,000 students and 15,000 teachers. On October 16th, they confirmed it suffered a cyber attack earlier this month, stating threat actors gained access to the district's email servers. We'll come back to that here in a minute, and maybe I'll go on a rant. October 5th, Clark County School District became aware of an incident impacting its email environment. Upon discovering the incident, CCSD immediately engaged in a team of forensic experts to investigate the incident. Good stuff. That's awesome. I do love that. Also cooperating with law enforcement through IC3 filings, assumedly, or whatever assumedly or other methodologies. Thus far, the investigation revealed that the unauthorized party accessed limited personal information related to a subset of students, parents, and employees. I imagine that subset is the challenge here in this statement, isn't it? In response to the attack, CCSD disabled access to its Google Workspace. Now they finally said what tech was at play here from external accounts and forced all students to reset passwords. We're talking about sessions or password compromise. I'm so sorry to tell you this, but unfortunately, your private information has been leaked. This is the wording from the letter. You should probably change your information. You should probably change. Like, hey, bro, I just want you to know, like, this might be a thing. Oh, geez. Okay, I'm done. I don't need to continue with this. But ultimately, students and parents are upset, scared that the threat actor has their data, which they should be. Bleeping Computer has contacted on Friday, but have not received responses. They were closed for Nevada Day holiday. But essentially begun to leak. The claim is 200,000 CCSD student informations, calling themselves Singularity MD is the threat actors, supposedly the hack team, would like to make a statement for clarification. CCSD did not detect a security issue. We emailed them to tell them they had been in their network for a few months, reads a note by the hackers on a code sharing site. For 6 years, they forced students to use their birthday as their password. We can get back to even that aspect of like programmatic or algorithmic password creation. It's such a challenge. Resetting the passwords back to their birth date each year. They even prevented the students from securing their accounts. I mean, this is just a laundry list of what's found here, right? We asked for less than 1/3 of Jesus Efhara's annual salary in exchange for destroying the stolen data. This callousness and incompetence of the leadership. You see this a lot where threat actors like berate the person afterwards, right? They typically, as far as also part of getting them to pay. The note contains links of leaked data, archives hosted on the dark web and clear websites containing what the hackers represent. Threat actors claim is the personal data of 200,000 students. The data allegedly contains students' emails, birth dates, ethnicity, PSAT scores, health information. That one's the shocker. That's horrifying. Suspensions, incident reports, and other information. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Dom? Like, there's so much to unpack here. So many things we could tackle.
Man, as a parent, I'd be so pissed. Like, and as a parent that understands cybersecurity too, like I have that privilege. Honestly, I'd be even more pissed, right? But I'd also been yelling at the school about my kid's shitty password, if I'm being honest.
For sure.
All in all, not good. We saw health information. We saw incident reports. We saw, I'm assuming PSAT is like their standardized state testing deal.
I'm assuming.
Or is that PSAT? I don't know. I'm assuming that's a test. Like, there's a lot of information in there you could use against someone, right?
Pre-SATs. That's probably what that is. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
which is probably whatever. It's just a score, but I think that's plenty of information to start stealing a lot of identities. Times 200,000 children is pretty. And it, we talk a lot about the increase in brutality with the reduction in payment. And I think that's what this is, right? If you're emailing parents, that's what this is shock someone else into convincing the school to.
Well, no, remember the emailing parents, it seems in this article, is the administrator saying your data was compromised. In this point, it's part of their breach notification aspect, I think, right? I don't believe they're emailing parents. Or did I misread that?
The threat actors were contacting parents. Yeah.
Oh,
did I
man.
misread that?
That's brutal. No, it's either way, it definitely could happen, would happen, and will happen.
Yeah.
And as time goes forward, right? And this understanding of once you have data and you need to extract money, they've done it before, right? Why does double extortion exist? Double extortion exists because people got good at backing up stuff. That's the reality of it. And they needed to then turn it into a doxing scenario. So why does this triple extortion aspect and extorting other victims? Because they can place pressure upon, or in the economic system, drive this actor to pay. Theoretically, right? That's the goal of this aspect. So, yeah, it doesn't shock me. I think the other thing I was going to speak towards is like email systems. We secured our Google. We wouldn't let people do it. You had to do a lot of things to make that function that way against the grain. And I think this is where at some point there will be culpability for platforms allowing people to use crappy security posture. There will be. You won't be able to make something that allows you to be like, no, bro, I just pressed these 2 buttons and I don't have airbags anymore. Like, it's just not how that works. There's just enough culpability in the car that they make it to where you must work your butt off to turn off the airbags. Right. And I think these are those kind of things that really will continue to play out, and we will see. And I think the fallout from this, as we're starting to see in some of these next articles, will continue to be larger as this goes, right? And you'll see more and more of this secure by design, secure by default. Okta, right? We've seen this one. Okta's warning, this is a little bit of an older article now, I guess it's been a week, but Okta's warning nearly 5,000 current and former employees that their personal information was exposed after a third-party vendor was breached. Okta is a San Francisco-based cloud identity and access management solutions provider. Everybody knows who Okta is. Single sign-on SSO or Control 5.6 and 6.7. And API access management services are used by thousands of organizations worldwide. A lot of people still feel that they should have an identity provider in front of their Microsoft consumption and productivity aspects, right? Instead of Microsoft directly. The data breach notification warns of a security incident was impacted by Rightway Healthcare, which provides healthcare coverage for Okta employees and their family. On September 23rd, 2023, Rightway suffered a network breach resulting in cybercriminals accessing, I like the use of that instead of hackers, thank you, an eligibility census file maintained for insurance provision and benefit plans for eligible individuals. They had full names, social security numbers, health or medical insurance plan number, that is like probably like that combination is the juiciest money cow
for
any
sure.
threat actor, by the way. It's so good. Okta learned about the breach October 12th, which what I do love, Dom, and maybe we'll see if there's any highlights here. We'll come back to this, but the reporting timelines we've seen lately. The notice highlights twice that Okta had no evidence of personal information those people has been misused. I hate that statement. Anyways. We have no evidence that personal information have been misused yet. Today, at this point, it's data.
It will happen.
Okta share
for sure.
Right. An Okta vendor, Rightway Health, had security incident in September 2023, which files from April 2019 through 2020 were exfilled from its IT environment. So that is going to be a breach, right, in that definition. Yeah. These contained personal information about employees and their dependents from 19 and 20. The incident does not relate to the use of Okta services. Those remain secure, like that statement. Jeez, like that's cool. The Titanic won't sink. Anyways, I digress, but it's okay. So what do you think about this, Tom? We don't have to keep reading this to people.
This is, I mean, if you're Okta, I don't remember if it's 2 or 3, but they've had 2 or 3 first party.
Well, here's 2 more of them, right? You've got December 2022 with the GitHub repos, and you've got March 2022 with the Lapsus threat group.
And then October 2023.
That's the one where they said it wasn't real, and they, So that's 3.
So, that sucks because this one it's a supply chain, it's a third party vendor, but you're Okta and you've just been through this multiple times when it was your own stuff. And if you don't know, Okta does identity for some of the largest entities there are commercially, right? And they have a substantial federal business. So Okta is a huge vendor in identity. So it's got to be a hard pill to swallow to be in this position if you're them right now.
Think about what you have if you're an adversary right now. If I have the names, dates of birth, health information about beneficiaries, information about emergency points of contact. If I have all of those things from that vendor, how much better am I at attacking, targeting, and going after people inside that organization to gain that next lever? Like, how valuable is that to me
brutality
as a consumer?
That.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like
for coercion aspects.
Calling your wife with all your kids' names and dates of birth and what medical conditions they're being insured for, and that's terrifying, right? So there's a lot at play here. And if you're Okta,
just a lot of information about employees. One concerted set of data about these employees that's sellable on the dark web for that aspect, right? Like that would have a lot of value for me in even targeting with spear phishing with the right kind of, brand new cure for this incurable disease that your son has. Like, what is the chance that person doesn't read that one that comes through their email filter, right? And so I think the chance for social engineering goes way higher. I think the chance for using that data to actually fight filters and password reset methodologies. Hell, at this one school, you could just use that date of birth you got out of that platform to sign in. That's all you need, right? Like it's one I just heard about. Sorry, too soon? Okay, maybe too soon. Right. So we have this challenge of this, and what I also wanted to tie back to, and we talked about this, Dom, is you do have a massive adherence to rapid reporting that is coming solely from forces and pressures like the SEC, from forces and pressures like DOJ, things that are starting to drive IC3, CISA, all of these forces at play are driving a much like we're talking about an event that happened in October 12th. Like the paint isn't even dry on the forensics, right? And we're talking about Okta's hit through this third party. These reporting cadences have gotten really good. Like I'm very happy, I guess. I'm not happy, but happy. And we see that we're being more transparent about it
too, before we understand, like if you're the victim or if you're the target, the fact that if you're willing to release before you know the totality of what's going on, but you're willing to start talking is massive. Like, hey, we're having an incident. We don't really understand this incident, but we're going to understand this incident. Like, that's so much better than it used to be, especially when you compare it to the black hole of nothing that was incident reporting before, right?
Yep.
Where you
Oh,
found
right.
out about it when you had accounts
Well,
opened in your name.
and that time's not even that far back in history, Dom. Like you and I actually coined and talked, well, not coined, but at least propagated the term, the Microsoft doctrine, right? After
Right.
the SolarWinds deal, and you had Microsoft come out with their code base attack and what happened to them. Like you start seeing more and more people feel like the stigma is being lifted. We need to talk about it. Even though there's idiots with loud, big beards and eyes that point in two different directions that talk about all the failures and the problems, they do understand
Right.
that it's moving the needle. But on the other side of it, you also going back to this whole concept of middle theory and basically just capitalism in general and how it corrects, right? You have this same kind of pendulum swing with the SEC. Like Okta being hit, there was a news article about 2 days afterwards that said stocks open trading in negative 3.5% for Okta due to
Right.
release and belief in recent breach compromises will cause a reduction in future sales. You're starting to see
Right.
the ability for the informed consumer to actually have an opinion about companies based on their security posture, right? And anyways, I'm just having a
Well,
breath
I mean,
of hope through
look at
this.
what Iraq
Yeah.
faced when their entire email service got deleted, right? Like
Oh yeah.
that was really it was a tough week financially for them.
Oh yeah.
So it's
And not and the class actions that spawned out of that aren't done, right? There are
no,
impacts to real businesses that will set precedents in case from that as well, I think, in my opinion. So,
right.
anyways, we're way behind on the news, but I still want to finish through it. So let's bring up this next one, which is even
This is the big
further
one.
proof of this, right? The Security and Exchange Commission today announced charges against Austin, Texas-based software company SolarWinds Corporation and its CISO, Timothy G. Brown, for fraud and internal control failures relating to an allegedly known cybersecurity risk and vulnerabilities. You can usually track when you're reading a document wherever they put the allegedly is the part they're accusing you of, right? That's the piece that you
Yeah.
haven't proven out yet. So the allegedly
Right.
known cybersecurity risk. The complaint alleges from at least its October 2018 filing through at least December 2020, which was, if y'all remember, the massive event dubbed Sunburst, which was part of the whole proxy log on, enumerability where people, anyways, don't want to get off on a tangent. But understanding and failing to disclose known risks. Its filing with the SEC during this period, SolarWinds allegedly misled investors by disclosing only generic and hypothetical risk at a time when the company and Brown knew of specific deficiencies in SolarWinds cybersecurity practices. Right? As the complaint alleges, SolarWinds' public statements about its cybersecurity practices and risks were at odds with its internal assessments, meaning they didn't actually agree with each other, including a 2018 presentation prepared by the company and engineers shared internally with Brown. The SolarWinds remote access setup that multiple communications among SolarWinds, including Brown, throughout 2019 and 20, questioned the company's ability to protect its critical assets. That'd be internal people like me and Dom going, "Hey, this isn't right, y'all. We need to change this. This is the real
Probably in
problem. We
writing,
can't do this."
by the way.
In writing, oftentimes, and provable in this situation, as it would
Right.
turn out, probably. The SEC's complaint alleges that Brown was aware of the SolarWinds risks and vulnerabilities and failed to resolve the issues, or at times sufficiently raised them with further in the company. We will delve into that like nuts. We allege that for years, this is the one that stood out to me. We allege that for years, SolarWinds and Brown ignored repeated red flags about SolarWinds cyber risks, which were well known throughout the company and led one of Brown's subordinates to conclude we're so far from being a security-minded company, right? Like straight up, as they're selling security products and as they're going down that path, said Gubir Esbrol, director of the SEC's Division of Enforcement. Rather than address these vulnerabilities, SolarWinds and Brown engaged in a campaign to paint a false picture of the cyber posture and controls environment, that presumably for business, thereby depriving investors of accurate material information. Today's enforcement action not only charges SolarWinds and Brown for misleading the investors, but also they're failing to protect their crown jewels, and also underscores our message to issuers: implement strong controls, calibrated to your risk, and level investors about known concerns. Like straight up, there's nothing. We don't have to continue down this. There's nothing stronger than saying, if you suck at it, be honest. If you're honest about it and you suck and you need to be better, then be better. And in reality, a lot of us are up against that pressure. And you know, there was backlash in the community, Dom, about maybe this will drive away all CISOs. Nobody will want to be a CISO. I don't know that I think that's true. I think, in my
I
opinion,
think people
you have
won't
this-
want to be a CISO in an organization where they can't get buy-in from the board and other executives. Like that's, you know, if I'm a CISO and I'm not being heard by my executive counterparts on my board, I'm out. I'm done.
Yep. And
I'll
there's
probably
an
be
interesting
public about
path,
why.
isn't there, Dom?
Like,
Yeah, or public and also quite whistleblower-y. I don't think that's a
Right.
real word, but I'm using it, right? Like when we talk about the
Coined it.
Department of Justice Civil Cyber Fraud Initiative, and the wielding of FCA and what might then turn into many other methodologies along with that, like consumer safety, things like that, you're starting to get into an understanding that there's going to be some real opportunities for CISOs to be a whistleblower and make a third of, $1 billion payout potentially, right? With a lot of knowledge and material ability to prove it and ability to show that. I think the challenge you face here is that in this aspect of it, the person quite likely committed fraud in my opinion, this is my opinion, this isn't a PAX 8 opinion, this is Matt Lee's opinion. It is likely that there were pressures inside the organization, just as there are in many. That's your job, is to report that we passed our controls. That's your to report that we are secure and that our application security and development environments are above bar and the best in the world. That's your job. And sometimes that's your only mouthpiece. And sometimes that's your only. At some point, people will say, I'm not willing to go to jail for this, to go to jail for fraud and defrauding the American public for your inability to deal with your brownfield challenges and operations.
Well,
brownfield,
the angle of this particular indictment, or whatever it's called, it's an indictment, right? Whatever it is, these charges, they come out of the SEC. Remember, SolarWinds is a publicly traded entity. They're going the investor fraud route, which is interesting. So what I'm thinking is, and I don't go read 8Ks from SolarWinds, I don't care, but they reported we passed XYZ, SOC 2, what have you. They didn't. Mm-hmm. And I think in combination, if you're a publicly traded company, the SEC can do what they please when they please.
Well, and think about this. Let's remember, it's not passing or certified in SOC 2. Yes. Really, it's a report, right? It's about how you take that report and represent it, I think, is probably the challenge. I don't know. Right. I'm not speaking from having dug directly into the
Well, I'm sure some e-discovery went on,
yeah,
and emails were dug out of the archive, and here they are.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Well, they had quotes to reference, right? You saw the quote of a couple of employees. So yeah, agreed.
Right.
So, all right. Don't want to beat this to death, but you are starting to see where there's real ramifications. You saw it first with, Uber. You saw it, in kind of a tangential way with the gentleman from Ubiquity, right? You're going to see more and more of these ramifications of being that leader, being that head and driver and owner of the security program. You better be honest with your investors and your board. And that, I think, is ultimately going to drive more either growth of the CISO to have a better conversation with the board, a better way to have that conversation with the board, a growth of the board to understand that maybe they can't learn it all potentially and they need to take some decisions and allow it to be as a seat at the table. But several of those things, in my opinion, start to play out as a result of some of these things and some of those forces. I still believe that there will be CISOs available. I still believe there will be idiots that are willing to be at the top of the chain, knowing that we're at the worst state we can all be in ever, if I'm candid. So yeah, I God bless the CISO for sure. So I don't want this to sound like a CISO bashing conversation in my mind. It takes a lot in special character to be there. Okay. Cool. Dom, anything to add to this before we're like 9 minutes already out of our run of show and we got producers all like slapping at us back there, I'm sure.
Just think twice before you understand who you're going to be a CISO for if you're going to be a CISO. And
true story.
I think I'm going to short whoever loses their CISO in the next year or so. I don't know. Anyways, let's hear some words from
wow.
From Robin.
Yeah, wow. Fair. Nice closing remarks. That's baller. Let's bring in Robin. Man, that's
You may or may not know, but the ISO 27001 has got an upgrade. And they started the process a while ago when they came out with the ISO 27002 update before they came out with the ISO 20001. I don't get that, but okay. But here's the thing. Officially, October 2022 through October 2025. That's your transition period. After that, if you're not upgraded, if you haven't moved to the new standard, you're starting the process all over again. Now, what's interesting about this, the updates, it's gone from 114 controls to 93. So it sounds like it's less. But when you dig down into the new controls, you'll see they're asking for people to take more steps. They're asking for evidence. They're like, you can't just tell us you did it. We want to see evidence that you're doing this and you're doing that. And we want more in business continuity. And So even though the control number has decreased, the work to fulfill those controls is increasing. So you're going to see new controls in data governance, supply chain security. There was already some requirements about supply chain. That's when you bring in third parties to do business with. But they've beefed that up. And then also about using cloud services. Now there are controls specifically about doing business in the cloud. Now, this is what I thought was really interesting. And I was like, oh, they got us. When you switch over, you have to have a transitional audit. I'm like, are you kidding me? So this is in addition to the normal audit. Now you have to have a transition audit. So if you're combining that, you can do it all at one time, but what that means is it's going to take more time and it's going to cost you more money. You're not going to get out of that. When you switch over, just put it in your budget. It's going to take more time and more money. And that's just the way it is. Now, you know these standards, the last standard was 2000, I think they had something in 2017 and 2013. Once we switch over, we'll live with that for a little bit before it gets updated again. But here's the thing, I don't want you to wait to the last minute. Please don't say, oh, we've got to October 2025, so we are not going to switch over until September. Don't wait to the last minute to do that switch. You want to get a copy of the updated standards. You want to do a gap analysis to see what does that mean we need to change about how we're conducting our business, what kind of evidence, what kind of processes will we need to put in place. The last thing you want to do is wait to the last minute, because if something goes wrong, you've just jeopardized your certification. So you want to give yourself some time, you want to give yourself some grace, and you want to be sensitive to the impact it's going to have on your various teams, because you're going to be hitting them a little harder than normal. So the best thing is to plan for it and just get it out the way. That's my recommendation.
All right,
Man, I love
Dom
you,
and I.
Robin. And to cover ISO 27001, oof, I was a part of that, and that's a tough one.
Yeah, you were like all the findings, right?
Not all. Come on now, but probably most of them. Yeah.
I tease.
She's got a Dom
it's
folder
funny.
on her
We were
desktop,
talking
probably.
just just the Dom jacket, right? I carry it around with me to executives and stuff. Yeah, just to be able to explain where we are. But we realized with the guests we're bringing on, right? And I want to take this as an opportunity for us to kind of do a very kind of beard bantery, if you will, early days, just conversation. We actually don't have any bullet points. Our whole line is just chat with this dude about this subject. And the subject is professional services, right? And I think that when we talk about the commoditization of the MSP in the way that I talk about it, the normal day-to-day broken machine, broken not machine aspects of it, is actually now transitioning into very effective strategic services and very effective delivery of professional services, right? I think that's where the transition is, the ability to get someone to the image that is now supportable and where they need to be. I have to either help them transition or I have to help them build it from the ground up, and either of those are probably a professional service. The other thing we talked about is we really screwed this whole thing up in that we didn't talk about MDMs, because I'm Matt, we have Matt and Dom, and that would have been if we put us in order in letters, and we might as well just do that. We'd have an MDM, right? We could have been like letters there. No, it's a totally corny joke. I only get one a day, so I'm sorry I waited till now. But let's bring on Matt for us. He's awesome, and we'll let him give his introduction of who he is and kind of what his day job is. All right, Matt, welcome to the show, buddy. Good to see you.
How are you both?
You actually would have been MMD and this wouldn't have worked. So I'm totally wrong about this whole show thing. It's okay. It's good.
That means something else.
well,
So we're here to talk about professional services. Matt, why don't you introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and what you do and kind of what company you work for and all that.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you both for having me first and foremost. Matt Lombardo, Manager of Professional Services over at Electric AI. Been there about 2 years. In charge of all things professional services, solutions architecture, project engineering, and project management for our customers. that are mainly in the SMB space.
Very awesome. So where did you get your start in tech, man? Let's just go there, because I know where Dom's start was. Where did you step into tech before this now ProServe and that aspect of it?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. I think like some, I started off in retail over at Circuit City before the days of Best Buy's Geek Squad. Doing some repairs and hard drive swaps and that type of stuff. And then from there, went to college, did 4 years in computer information systems and programming, and really got my hands on a little bit of everything.
I do love that you referenced college, like doing time. You're like, I did 4 long years in the slammer of information security, and it crushed me into a new man. Right? Like, anyway, sorry, I just had to stop you on that.
No,
continue.
It's a wild thing though, right? Like for me, coming out of college, I got my first gig, as like an L1 for a school district, and none of the guys I worked with went to college. And I was like, what did I just do? Started talking about Microsoft certifications and all that stuff, and I started to quickly learn what that was. And was at that school district for 15 years. I was more of a generalist than a specialist. Yeah. Long time.
There's so much
at that
in
school
that,
district,
though.
were student passwords constructed based on date of birth or like an animal? Like, how was that?
He don't want to tell us. He don't want to say
it. Let's just say for a kindergarten, you have to make it somewhat, easy to type.
This is fair.
I think that's the easiest way to go about it. Yeah.
Give them a token we did. And sign in that way nowadays, right? We have new options that didn't exist for that ease of use at those days. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I mean, at least you told on yourself. I did too. I did the same thing. Did you?
We had password complexity in play. We did what we had to do.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I was going to say though, but
15 years.
Yeah, being at a school district that long and involved as a generalist in IT, you see almost every part of it. You see from cable runs to physical terminations to network design and replacements to implementing web filters that just suck and don't work and kids get around every time. And like you do all of that stuff. And I think I learned the most working with kids because they're the ones that press the most bad buttons, right? Like I put in a DNS filter one time, and this one little kid hammered against the XXX sites to the tune of like 95 of them. Like, I don't even think I could come up with 95 porn sites, even just thinking about it. And my bro was testing every single link, right? The minute he had his first take-home laptop for this school. And so like, I have to imagine you've seen it all in 15 years in dealing with school districts, because you kind of are a generalist. You wear every hat in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. I've done it all. I've done network upgrades. I've done Barracuda, email spam solutions. I've seen on-prem virtualization. I've seen it all. And the kids, I think, are your best learning lesson. I mean, like you said, they want to get around it. They want to get around it, and that's their goal. They're your worst hacker.
And what's cool about it too is it draws corollary into your work now at an MSP, because in a lot of ways you have to do so good at that user expectation and drive of how they end up to be successful in a project, right? And so I think there's a lot of learning that came from working with students for that long that translates directly into working at an MSP. So I'll let you continue your story of how you wound up at the MSP then.
Yeah. So eventually, I was looking for more, and I said it's my time to move on, which I did, and went over to where I am at now at Electric AI, and quickly learned how different things are from an MSP standpoint. Still doing a lot more, touching a lot more technologies, but learning more about like SMBs and customers and that are in different industries and what their needs are.
Isn't that cool?
It was definitely
one of my favorite parts.
Oh, it was awesome. It was absolutely awesome.
Yeah, it's funny.
It's
you talk about coming over. You talk about coming over to an MSP, and I'd love to ask your opinion on this. I was interviewing a guy for a job at my MSP. I was in charge of ProServices at the time, and I was bringing on a top level tech for professional services. And this was during a lot of the time when you're doing a lot of V2V and P2V migrations to go virtual, right? This was back in those days. It was when you're doing a lot of email migrations and a lot of file migrations and carve aparts and things, and a lot of that day to day. And this guy comes in and he has a resume, and he's been at this one mid-sized enterprise company for the last 10 years. And he says to me, Matt, I've done 5 P2V migrations. I've done 4 V2V migrations. I've done 2 email migrations. I've done an entire IAM infrastructure. And I said, man, listen, I sat back. I kind of feel like I went super cowboy and like legs up and like pushed back the thing, but I didn't, probably. Like I was still super nerdy and kind of heavy. But I like pushed back the resume and I was like, listen, man, I gotta set an understanding of pace of play with you. I said, you've had 10 years in one organization and you have a great background. You've done a lot of the skill sets that I'm talking about, but your 10-year resume is my average project text Thursday. Like, I just want to put this into perspective of the difference of scale. And so I say that to say, jumping from school district, even with school district, you have a lot of these different schools, so it kind of can keep you super busy and hectic. But would you say that your pace of play today is faster than that was, and you had to adjust to that in this world? Or would you say it was similar? Or what are your thoughts on that statement? Because it was totally apparent to me how much different the world was for us in the MSP world.
Yeah. The pace of play is night and day. I mean, for a project to get off the ground at a school district, you're talking budgeting. You're talking when is a holiday break that we could even do this. Moving over to a fast-paced MSP with over 500 customers, it's everybody wants their email migration tomorrow.
Can we schedule it next? Well, Dom, I'm looking at you on this one. Yeah. Dom, is this something you experience on something that you might be able to commiserate with Matt here?
That's literally my day job, right? Is we service 22,000 some odd MSPs for professional services, and everyone needs it done now. So it's a conversation of what's really a priority, right? And why is it a priority? It's what I tend to ask.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like asking those questions. Oh, yeah. Asking those questions to the customers, right? Like, why is this important? Why is your deadline so hard? Sure. Are you migrating from another MSP that you need to get this done now? It's knowing what to ask, how to communicate effectively that, sets it apart.
Yeah. And I think you hit on some of it, right, Dom? Like, it's really business reasoning that has to matter the most. I think that's where we really get into this balance. And it is one of the challenges, right? If you're in one monolithic org and it's one business, you're serving the business where one executive can make a decision of what takes priority at some point, right? You could make that a reality. When you're being a service provider, and Dom is a service provider to MSPs, and MSPs are service providers to their end clients, you are now having to make decisions of greater good, greater economic impact. Which one in a limited world do I get to first, and how do I make that decision? Let's talk about that for a little bit. I'd love to talk about maybe each of us maybe tackle a little bit of like, how do you handle that decision? Like Sophie's choice, 2 main customers need the resources. You have one set of those resources. I know sometimes you squeeze out 2 resources and you just have one bloke do 2 times as much, but that coffer only fills up so far, right? Like there's still a challenge to that problem. What are your thoughts, Dom? And then we'll go to you,
Matt. So we've got somewhere around 80 projects happening in flight at any given time, across my 2 groups of engineers. And I've got a pipeline of, 200 projects. I haven't looked in the last hour, so it's changed, but we're a very high volume shop, and we're really building towards standardization. So we really look at it as, hey, I need to be in Azure next Tuesday. First question you ask is why. And I think sometimes it's because Azure's cool, or because we think the solution is going to work great. And it's like, cool, that's not urgent. And here's why it's not urgent. Here's your business case versus, we lost track of this colo contract expiration. And unfortunately we're running up against the wire. And if I don't, now I'm stuck in the colo another year. There's different conversations you have to have and understand what's the business impact if I don't get your project done in the timelines you expected. And I think at our volume with the amount of pipeline we have, I really work with my team on understanding the expected timeline. And if it's not going to work, saying it now so that they can look elsewhere if they need to. Because I cannot service everyone exactly when they need service. So I think that's one of the biggest things you tackled from our perspective, where I have a field of 22,000 MSPs that I work with. Right.
I think you tackled 2 real critical pieces I want to highlight there. One is the filtering of that need and necessity down to business outcomes and results, right? I think that's the first piece of filtering out histrionics, filtering out just that raw demand to get something done, or because someone's pressuring into what is the real business impact? What are those things? That's the first piece of it. And I think maybe even the more critical part that you came up with, which is that communication aspect of it. When you're dealing with ProServices, and if you listen to Brad Gross at all, he says people don't sue you over what happens. People sue you over how you communicated about what happens and how you communicate things as you go along, right? And I think a lot of that conversation, and I'm definitely paraphrasing, so Brad, you can just like send me your bill and we'll figure it out. But ultimately, I think the piece is, you tackled actually reaching out to that customer and saying, here's what my expectations are. Here's what I can do. And the better you set those expectations, the better you're able to deal with that. And then the better you hold to those expectations is really how ProServices is judged, isn't it? Right? It's the outcome, the timeliness. It's almost like building a house. You might wind up with the best house in the world and look back and go, I hate my contractor. Why? He never called. He didn't show up. He told me he was going to do this on Tuesday. I had 2 electricians standing here on Thursday that didn't get the ability to do their job, right? And so you run into a lot of those things where at the end of the day, ProServe or services in general, how you make them feel and how you communicate with them has just as much impact as the actual final outcome for the most part. Matt, what are your tips and thoughts when you're trying to deal with an unlimited set of demand and a limited set of resources from a customer perspective?
Yeah, I think similar to Dom, we're in the same realm. We're upwards of 40 to 50 projects in flight at any time, varying degree, complexity. Right, that's a whole another aspect of it is complexity, and I think the communication is the main thing. Right, expectation setting is what I tell my team, and I think just being honest. If you like Dom said, if you can't get to it and you don't have the bandwidth, being transparent with your customers, telling them that. And I'm a big component of too. I'm a big component of. I just had this call the other day with a prospective customer where I knew we couldn't do it, but I gave them another option. Like, hey, we just don't have the bandwidth, but here's someone else who can help you.
Sure. It's caring about their outcome, right? As the piece you're kind of codifying there in that is that you actually care about the outcome of that project. So far we've got filtered the demand, right? I think we've got the understanding of communications very well hammered home and setting realistic expectations. And I think the last piece that you really brought to light is caring about the outcome, caring about them enough to say, if I can't do this and I understand the impact, I'm a willing partner to understand that my revenue isn't the most important. And me waiting another week to get that to happen isn't. It's your outcome. And I think that's one of those things where, to your point of being willing to do that, they might also find that there aren't as big of extenuating circumstances and they do wait for you and get to that point. And now they're doing it in a much better fashion of understanding kind of what they chose to do and why they chose to do it. And as long as you communicate from that point forward, it usually goes pretty well in my experience, right? I never really got to a caseload and a management load of 80. I can tell you I had some standing problems even at 20 or 30 projects going at any given time when I was running that in my former org. But when you think about that, Dom, how do you think how important is a statement of work? And let's tackle, before you lose your crap, let's tackle statement of work and adherence to that scope creep.
You get to a certain scale. I'll say so if we could easily probably be doing 100 projects. We resource our people a little bit differently than most MSPs. There's more free time, not free time, but personal development time and things like that that we try to bake in. And then when that's not the reality on the ground and we have 100, we'll do 100. But when you do that, one of the things that happens is the whale comes in, right? They need 480 users moved out of something into something quickly. That throws a wrench in things, right? Because we're doing an average of 20 or 30 seats per mailbox migration, just to kind of put it in perspective. That 500 seater comes in and operations is where am I going to squeeze this triple, quadruple, 10 times the size project in? So there's that aspect. And when it comes to that, you live and die by that scope, right? And we have not historically been great at this. And I wasn't historically great at writing scopes at my MSP, and I'm sure you've all been in the same boat. And we keep refining that process so that it's absolutely finite what we're responsible for. And in our model, because we serve customers through partners, it has to be absolutely clear. If we're doing a project for electric, here's what electric is responsible for in the totality of what you've asked us to accomplish, and here's what we're going to do for you. And then I have to count on you to read and understand that scope, and let us execute in that fashion. And I think so. There's two full and I had the same thing with customers, so I'm not I ran an MSP, so I'm not shitting on MSP so much as saying there is the challenge with MSPs or with customers that they didn't even read the scope. They said the number looks good and they signed it and they don't understand what they've just bought.
I've seen it. What's funny is before we go on, we have somebody in the LinkedIn chat. It's not coming in through mine. I couldn't find it on my actual stream, so if I don't know your name, I'm sorry. But they said 260 projects executing currently. I'd love to know who this is, but good God, like good gosh, I hope there's enough breadth of depth of your execution team underneath that has that segmented out into management and structure, not owning near as much of that in any one segment. So whoever you are, if you put your name in, I'll see it. I can't see it through the chat, but I'm seeing it through the feed. So very interesting. Yeah, that's crazy. You know, Matt, talking about this when we go to statement of work, what are your thoughts? What's the burr in your challenge? Like, we sucked at statement of works at first. I was the worst at it. I would let scope creep come in. You'd have expected project times turn into a source pass. Okay, cool. Have expected projects turn into extremely larger projects. So what are your thoughts on scope creep and statement of work conversations for people listening, trying to build a pro services world?
Yeah, I think Dom kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Like, a lot of people don't read it. They just blindly sign, and the number looks great. It's in my budget. I'm ready to rock and roll. Let's get it done. And it's like, now you kick off the project and you bring up that first, customer responsibility or prerequisite or assumption, and it's not there. And it's
yeah. Like, what do you mean there's not 240 drops already pre-terminated hanging here from your electrician? You needed me to do that with the patch panel? Like I said, I wasn't doing it. I was going to bring cables to patch into a patch panel. Wait, no. Right? Nobody's ever dealt with that before. I'm certainly not speaking as a lover in that situation before. Yeah. And some of it's my fault, some of it's theirs, right? Sometimes it's been where I didn't pay attention to some portion of that or some of the execution, and through my own failure in project management, let alone, so the other side of this is getting the scope right and not failing your side of the scope in the beginning of that, of expectations.
Well, there's a very human element to this too, right? Like, if we serve MSPs across the board, right? From the largest, to dudes that have probably been in business for 6 months. I mean, I don't know, but right, they're very small. They're growing. They may have never experienced an Azure migration, right? So we're going to put everything they're responsible for in there, but that doesn't mean they understand the totality of what an Azure migration entails, or what is managing Azure, or,
nor that they've explained that to the customer effectively and set those expectations, right? So you have this rubber band effect from that. Sorry.
So it becomes a lot of challenges of making sure that we're building the right resources. I work really closely with Rex and the Academy team on how do I teach a partner who has no idea what they just bought, how to manage what my team's going to build for them? Because they're going to do a great job building it, but if they don't do a great job maintaining it, it's going to fall apart, right? So there's that aspect to customers as well. If the electrician didn't come in and put in all the patch panels, then somebody missed the totality of the work required to have drops, right?
Yes.
And that's a really hard, very human. You can't put all of that in a scope. You just can't. You'd have a 400-page scope for a $2,000 project. So it's really hard to kind of decipher that education layer too.
Yeah, I think that's a fair call out. We actually used to put in like a line that basically said, like, if it's not stated in the statement of work, it's not included, because exactly what Dom just said, we used to get hit with, like, well, it's not in there. And it's like, yeah, well, I can't put every scenario and possibility in there. So, there's got to be some CYA there so that we could do the work effectively, deliver it to you, as we discussed, as we promised.
So now let's pivot this to say, how effective and what are some strategies to be effective at capturing that scope creep dollar and ensuring that you're actually billing for those pro services that exceed those scopes? What are some good strategies on how you ensure that you don't miss it and that you can sell it to the customer and they understand it and pay it?
So I'll give our perspective real quick, because I think it's unique from the MSP perspective. The organization I sit in is called Partner Enablement, right? Pax8 is a company that distributes and sells and has a marketplace to provide licensing. We do services to enable that function to be smoother and faster and at scale. So when we have scope creep, let's say it's a 50 mailbox migration, there's 52 mailboxes, we let it go, right? Because I am not charged with running a certain profit number or anything like that. I'm supposed to roughly be revenue neutral and enable partners to deliver more services. That's my entire sort of, and one of my core values is that the partner needs to be taken care of. So a lot of times on scope creep, particularly scope creep, we know is accidental. It's very easy to miss 2 mailboxes buried in some
Yeah, I love that
stupid
you
OU
clarified
somewhere.
so you don't get like 45 under scoped projects, just so you could have a difference there next week, right? So I'm glad you clarified.
I will
Accidental,
cut you off,
not
but
abusive.
yeah. I think it's and look, we have absolutely had partners tell us the wrong information and expect us not to realize we're migrating double the data, right? But one, that's extremely rare. And two, it's really hard to be super accurate on detailed migration. So we let some of that slide. I think in my days as an MSP, one mailbox, you're getting a change order, and it's the full, whatever your MSP's rate is to migrate that mailbox, because I am running a profitable services shop, and that's how I make my money. So I have this really interesting place I sit where I'm not trying to make money on services.
Yeah. You're here to enable mailbox sales, numbers of humans consuming, the MSP being profitable. What's interesting about this is Leonid Feldman jumped in the chat and said exactly that. Progress-based billing, I assume is what he's saying here, and change orders always, right? Progress-based being, you pay me a certain percentage as I go down that percentage. Matt, what are your thoughts to add to this one on how you ensure, because you are running a profit business, you do need to make money, unlike Dom and his endeavors that are PAX8 driven towards your success. But like, what do you have to do to make sure you don't miss it? Is it change orders? Help me understand.
Yeah, no, we definitely make sure. I think similar to like what Dom said, we definitely do that too, right? Like if we're migrating 50 mailboxes and we discovered another one, we're not gonna slam the customer over a mailbox. We don't want to make it unpleasant for them at that point, right? And we also want to keep it on track. By the time we have to get a change order for one mailbox, send the quote, have them sign it, we could have done it already.
You could already sync the mailbox in the same amount of hours, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. But there are those extenuating circumstances where we do have to do a change order. And, sometimes that's a difficult conversation, but I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like if you're being upfront, you're being honest, you're being candid with the customer and explaining the why, and explaining how it was missed or why it was missed. Usually it's an easier conversation. And for 9 times out of 10, customers like, hey, you know what, let's sign it and get this done. And you keep it moving forward from that.
And I'd even go so far as to say
to change orders. So
go ahead, Dom.
This goes back way in my heyday. I was doing security cameras, which is a business you should never get in. I hated it. I'll never do it again. But nonetheless, I was installing security cameras and some access control components, and we needed, those screws with a little stud that like you can't unscrew without the right screwdriver. I ordered the wrong size.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
But the GC at this job site had, thousands of these damn screws, right? Because they were installing a bunch of their own crap. So anyways, I go to the super and I'm like, hey, can I get like 10 of these? I ordered the wrong ones and I'll give you these wrong size ones that I'm sure you can use. My client called me because they got a change order for 10 little like faceplate security screws because I had asked them and I had to buy them off of a customer. It was the most ridiculous thing. It was a 2-page change order.
Oh,
most ridiculous. It was like $7.
You should have framed that.
I really should.
Yeah, for sure. That's so good. That's so good. All right. So when it comes to being effective as professional services, for me, Dom, for yours, it's about how much enablement you're doing. It's also about adherence to your own schedule and scale and other business stakeholders in general. And for you in the same way, it's also, right, Matt, your job is about profitability, scale, and enabling the business to make the strategic changes that also hopefully reduce the ticket churn and challenges for supporting it and the impact to the customer. And that's the reason we do ProServices. I love ProServe because for me, it was that point I actually got to go paint. I actually got to go make something. I actually got to go put something together that was cool. I actually got to go do and build, and it fed that for me. So when you talk about it, like, what is your one advice if you're given somebody in that early ProServe director position that you would each give? I'd love to hear, what is your biggest advice you'd give somebody, young Padawan, come here, let me wrap my arms around you and teach you all the ways. What's the most important thing? I'm gonna let y'all pick the order.
I think I'll go. I mean, for me, I think the main thing is just reflecting what we do, something called like a lessons learned. And it's like, all right, if we
Sure.
did that scope of work
Ooh.
wrong, and we didn't do the discovery right, or what was the issue? Like, are we just going to say, all right, keep it moving, or do we learn from it? Like, how do we prevent this moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
And we're a big component of that. Myself, the project managers, the solutions architects, the engineers. Post project is a real thing. Say, hey, let's talk it through. Let's get through. Like, what did we learn from that? How do we avoid it moving forward? It's a huge, huge thing in my opinion, is talking it through.
All right, I'm going to go on a
Just
tangent real quick. Because I agree. I think there's such a cybersecurity corollary there, right? Your point is look back after every project and decide what went well, pat yourself on the back for it, decide what sucked, understand with a strong upper lip how you're going to be better next time, make changes, and continue to refine through that way. And basically having that critic's eye, right? I like to look back at stuff. If I ever look back at my work and at some point go, man, I crushed that last year, I would really like to quit working. There has to be things where I sucked at it. There has to be things I could be better. There have to be things that can be improved. And so I think, that's a great call out, man. I think that's probably the nugget to take away from this is have the ability to do a postmortem and look at it critically, right? And try to find the things where you could have improved, where you didn't follow scope, where you didn't make as profitable as you should have, where you didn't discover that shared mailbox, or like for me, it would always be those stupid public folders that you forget about, right? That are so ingrained and ancient. Maybe I'm telling my age here. Dom, what's your one point, Dom? What would you give somebody advice?
Fun fact, it costs 3 times as much with us to migrate 10 gigabytes of public folder data than it does one mailbox.
As
for
it
very
should.
good reason.
As it should.
But I digress. So I'm in a point in my career where I'm actually leading leaders, which when you get to that is a very interesting, because you have people trying to build their management style for your people and live under your management style for your people. But I try to ingrain a very similar, like, ideally engineers are smart, right? They should know what was wrong when something goes wrong. And when I was managing engineers, I really pushed them to tell me what the problem was. I knew what the problem was, but you want them to identify the problem and ideally the solution. Like maybe you need to nudge them. And that has made some of the best engineers we have successful at what they do, because they're innately comfortable with telling on themselves and working with the team to find a solution and bringing solutions to their own problem. So I really try to instill that piece, but also an understanding of, and I think a lot of MSPs go wrong with this, and I know this because we've had people apply for our roles from various MSPs whose engineers are so tied into the business metrics that they hate their job. Right, they're tied into their own profitability and everything else, and I think they need to understand that picture exists. But my people's reportable numbers, or the frontline reportable numbers, have nothing to do with billable time. It has to do with track time. I need to understand that piece. It has to do with making sure they're doing things like taking notes. But it is my job and my manager's job and my operations team's job to handle the business, right? And it's us as leaders' job to put the engineers in a position to do the nerdy shit that they came to our company to do, right? And I think that's when they start to be successful, when they get to spend all their time doing that.
Yeah. It's
It's true.
that
It's
creativity in building.
Yeah, and it's like a level of vulnerability, right? Like most people don't want to admit when they messed up, and that's a tough pill to swallow at times.
Yeah, and I think you have to make a culture for that, right? I think you have to have this understanding of, like, is there any belief that I don't make mistakes? If there is, you're probably stupid, right? So if I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm a very well-driven and focused human being that tries my hardest at things I do and has a high capacitance, then everyone's going to make mistakes. And so I think you have to make a culture for the only way you learn is through mistakes. Now, do those mistakes at some point cost more than the worth of the effort for the next training? Yeah, there's probably scenarios that could happen like that. Major breaches, major conversations that come from some of those challenges. Yes. But that said, if you foster an environment where you can say, hey, customer, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. This is what happened. I didn't make the dig into your public folders the way I should have, and I didn't understand that this was something you needed. I'm going to need to make this change. 9 times out of 10 in my experience, humility is met with similar humility. And I think people understand that. They want to help. And I think my advice that I'd give to anybody in almost anything in life is don't forget, humans want to be asked for help. You often sit there and think that nobody wants to be asked for help. That is not true. It's exactly the difference. And I'll ask you to do this. Just close your eyes and imagine that first time when you rose to the top of something that you got good at, and somebody looked at you and said, "Hey, Bill, hey, Sally, how do I do this? You look like you're really good at this. Can you help me?" Do you feel like you're off put by them? Do you feel like you're not valuable because of that? No, you feel like you're actually valuable. And somebody gives a crap about enough of what you have to say that you often become friends with that person. So why do people go so far with such arrogance in thinking that I can't learn from somebody else and I can't ask for help from somebody else, when if you ask me for help, there's a very high chance that I say yes. Now, maybe I've buried a couple of bodies that way accidentally. It sucks. But ultimately, most people do. Oh, sorry, did I say too much? This isn't live, is it? Oh, okay, good. No, I tease. But genuinely ask for help, y'all. It's really important. So, Matt, we got about 50 seconds left. Any closing thoughts or anything you'd like to say just about your career, what you do, the color of the sky? I don't really care. What would you like to close us out with, bud?
I would just say, first and foremost, thank you both for having me. It's been a great experience. And then, to wrap up what you just said, Matt, about like asking for help I'm a big believer, a big component of that. And I think that whether it's inside the workplace or outside, that's the most important key thing to life. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. It's a great way to close us out. Dom, you get to do all the fun
Fantastic.
nerdy bits to wrap this thing up. What you got, buddy?
All right. Thanks so much for joining us on the game. Matt, thanks for joining us. It's been a fantastic episode. That's our show for the week. So make sure you come back next week. We are going to have an SE from our internal team, Matt Monk, joining us to talk about, since the time he's been with us, which is a long time, how he's seeing buying decisions change across security products. And I think that's going to be extremely valuable insight for all of you out there as MSPs, and maybe get some different ideas for how to think about it. Classic outro. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget to sign up for PAX 8 Beyond and catch all the other PAX 8 live shows right here on YouTube, or, well, not on LinkedIn. Only the games on LinkedIn. Catch all the other PAX 8 shows on PAX 8 Cloud on YouTube, and we'll see you later.